The original concept was to take a suite of 9 pieces of music by the French composer Olivier Messiaen and to see whether all the layers and the textures that you find in these wonderful organ pieces could somehow be translated into a visual art form. In January 2007, Sarah Baldock, who's the Assistant Director of Music at Winchester Cathedral, approached me about whether or not this project would be possible. And a little further through the year, we started to meet and look at the score together. And she, as a musician, would talk about the images and the textures that she saw in the work. And I, as a visual artist, found myself very caught up with the structures of the music. I think I was a little bit wary about saying yes until I'd really got to know the music, because I wasn't sure whether I really liked Messiaen's work to start with. But I found the more I listened to it, the more I absolutely loved it. For each new piece out of the 9, the general process would be that Sarah and I would meet and we'd spread the score on the floor and listen to a number of different recordings by different organists. And we would almost sort of research the structure of the music to start to pick out the main themes. Now, Messiaen works in a very theological way. He's really exploring his faith and his spirituality in the way he works. So that was really important to try and honour when we were doing this. And my job really was to try and find a way of choosing materials that would somehow connect with the ideas that were coming out in the music. I'd often have a sketchbook by the side. We'd both have a pen in our hand and we'd scrawl whatever came to mind onto the score, and often adding a bit of colour here or there. Colours began to sort of stand for certain things as the project progressed. I started with a shape, which was the square. And there are 9 pieces of work, there are 9 squares, and they're all the same size. But everything that's gone onto that square is different from each piece. They're not paintings in the conventional sense where you draw your picture and fill it in, constantly adding things. Using nails and sandpaper and chisels and hot glue guns and stitching and resin and wax and all sorts of different substances to build up the surface. One example would be the one called the shepherds, les bergers, and the shepherds are very earthy, they're sort of humble, out of the earth. There's something very honest about the way the music makes them out to be. So I actually chose very earthy, natural materials to make the shepherds with, like hessian and tree bark and lovely rough handmade papers, even leather, very, very simple materials. I love to work with found objects. I do a lot of scavenging. My family are very patient with me. Whenever we're on holiday and I find an interesting beach, I walk with big carrier bags and collect flotsam and jetsam, interesting bits. My studio cupboards are full of rusty bits of metal and strange bits of wood in gnarled, interesting shapes. And it may take years before I know what I'm going to do with those things. And for this project, I collected a very particular range of things, stuff I hadn't ever used before, like copper and mirrored perspex and all fabrics I hadn't ever anticipated using in an artwork before. My aim was to try and make visible what emerged from the music itself. So it had a kind of, it was a bit like a sculptor would talk about a block of marble already holds the sculpture inside it. It's almost as though each piece of music already had the piece of work, but my job was to go and find the things that would make that happen. It has been probably the most challenging project actually that I've been involved with, and that's been partly to do with the nature of collaboration, which always brings its own challenges. It's also been perhaps to do with the starting point has been somebody else's imagination, and that's been Messiaen's. So I've tried to work with a completely different art form, music. Something that you hear and then it's gone, and I'm making something concrete that is there whether the music's heard or not. My greatest hope for what people would experience when they see this project would be that it's greater than the sum of its parts somehow. They're not just seeing the art, they're not just hearing the music, but by bringing the two together, it'll somehow deepen each person's experience of what's going on in the music in the first place. Messiaen's intention, his spiritual intention, and the depths to which that music can take you might be plumbed a little deeper